From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
After more than 30 years in law enforcement, Colonel Stephen O'Donnell, the 12th superintendent of the Rhode Island State Police, is hanging up his Stetson. O'Donnell's announcement caught many by surprise, capping off a storied career that included working undercover inside the New England crime family. This week on Newsmakers, the reason behind the departure and looking ahead for both the state police and the outgoing superintendent. Our guest, Colonel Stephen O'Donnell. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Ted Nisi is off this week, which is actually a good thing because I have a million questions for our guest, Colonel Stephen O'Donnell. Thank you very much for joining us. And look, congratulations on your retirement. Big decision. Sad for a lot of people, I'm sure, but congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes or no question to start the show. You are leaving this position sooner than you expected. Yes or no?
Yes.
Why?
It was that time.
But why is it sooner than you expected?
Well, you have goals when you set out for this, and I thought when my youngest son graduated from college, that would be the time that I would start to move out or transition out. But recognize I don't control that. And what I mean by that is things happen, and I think I've said this before, I'm on the national circuit with other law enforcement leaders. We talk all the time about this. When do you know? And they all said, without question, you'll just know.
Yeah, but let me pull something up that you put in your letter to Governor Gina Raimondo when you announced that you were going to retire to her. And we have it on the screen here. It says, every good leader knows when it is time to start the next chapter in his life. Several weeks ago, I realized that moment had arrived. You know what stood out to me on that? Several weeks ago. What happened several weeks ago that made you come to that realization? What moment was it?
No, it's a good question. I think, as you explained to everybody, over a course of your lifetime in this position, I just mean as a colonel's position, not as a state police detective and all the other things I did, there's things that just happen all the time in life. It happens where you work, it happens where everybody else works, where you have battles and differences internally, externally. It's just the way it works. So it came to a process probably earlier than that where I started questioning a little bit myself. How far, how much, because other people ask you, I can't tell you how many times people ask me, how long are you going to do this for? So there's no specific thing that happened. It really, like, I woke up and literally and was questioning myself. And I thought I caught myself. I think I use an analogy of being an athlete, where did I lose a step? No special reason, no smoking gun that said it. It's just a cumulative effect. And I thought about it, and I said, if I'm questioning myself, no different when I stopped playing sports competitively, that was a body issue. Can my body take it? So now, can my brain continue to function at the level I think I should to be effective, not just for me, but be effective for the people that I work with?
You understand why you're getting a lot of questions about this. Think about when Colonel Brendan Doherty took over for Stephen Perry. There was a lot of the perception was there were a lot of politics involved. And since Colonel Stone, I know we had Colonel Culhane, but Colonel Stone was the longest serving, correct me if I'm wrong, colonel in the history of the Rhode Island State Police. In the last 10 years, we've had Colonel Perry, Colonel Doherty, and Colonel O'Donnell. And a lot of people are wondering if politics is starting to penetrate the Rhode Island State Police. Is that the case? Do you feel like that's happening right now?
Well, it's a fair question, but you have to understand history. Colonel Stone was there forever, and it's a totally different time. And then Colonel Perry, all different times. So the time we live in now is 2016. If you go across the board and look at law enforcement leadership anywhere, it's a short term for many different reasons. There's so many things thrown at law enforcement, so different. Before either of my predecessors, that didn't happen 5-10 years ago. And a lot of it has to do with the groundswell of law enforcement in the country, what's happening with how people perceive law enforcement because videos that you're watching across the country. So it's a much more difficult job. It's a much more defining job, and it's
exhausting.
Time. And it is. And I have more energy than 50 people, and I never would stop. But you have to realize when, and I don't think people realize that. So I think Colonel Stone set the bar, and I'm not saying as the right leader or the wrong leader, but the time he spent there. I don't think you'll ever see that ever again from any state police agencies. My counterparts leave in 3 years across the country.
What did you hate about the job?
Probably nothing.
I don't believe that. Everybody hates something about their job.
No, hate's a real definitive and defining word.
Dislike, if you want to soften it a little bit?
I'd have to really dive deep into it. I work with wonderful people. they're unbelievable. I don't even know the words to describe how you really deal with a state trooper, from the junior trooper to the senior trooper. So I don't know if I could ever define that. I'm not trying to say there isn't something you wouldn't like. The process, state government process, I worked in the federal government, and so in comparison, state government works a lot faster than the federal government. But if you don't work in the federal government, you don't see it. So state government runs slowly. From a state police agency, maybe the only thing that you'd be disappointed is you can't get things done as fast as you want. For instance, we're building buildings, and we've been trying to build buildings for 5 years, and it's this exhaustive process of RFPs to hiring a company, and then that company can't be hired.
So the bureaucracy, if I'm hearing you right.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that's a hate by any means, but it's a frustration, because we're hands-on, let's get it done type organizations, and it's just the way the system's set up that kind of stymies you, not police-wise, but the administrative end of the job.
So let me ask you the sensitive question, because I didn't know what your answer to that one was going to be. But I know you don't like to talk about your family, but I got to ask you, what kind of toll did being colonel specifically take on your family, your wife?
That's a valid question. You know, they live, they breathe what you do, and I really don't want to talk about my family.
No, I get it, and I understand why.
It puts you in another place, but I have a great wife, great children, and more importantly, impact your kids. You know, I remember one of my sons telling me it really wasn't a lot of fun to be your son. And what he meant for that is he had different rules, different restrictions, and it's the colonel's kid and the state police son. And you just can't do things that other kids are going to do.
They're under the microscope.
Yes, and they have to live that way and understand that. And now they're young adults now, and that's all panned out well. So they had to live differently, even though they didn't want to. They want to be young boys and do what young boys do, and they didn't get the opportunity to always do that because of me. And you have a wife who went through this for 33 years. Well, I've known my wife since I've been a trooper. So she had to watch all the pros, the cons, and there's cons that go with this job. And what you do, I would tell you the great part of it is last night I took her to a community forum so the community leaders could meet her. And some of them have met her, some have not. And that's the glue that keeps families together. So she has to deal with me looking differently, acting differently during my undercover days, watching me grow up through the ranks, and watching all the pros and the cons. And they feel it differently than us. And I think I told you the other day that the sewer that I chose to live in, she didn't. But she did. And so she lived that, we survived it. And I'm happy that at the end of the day, I have a family that's intact. And I mean that sincerely.
And a lot of people don't know you have a son that is on the job right now. He's a state trooper. Before I get to some questions about moving forward, specific to your son as a dad, where we are now is very different, I would imagine, climate than when you began as a trooper 3 decades ago. You worried about him as a trooper right now where we are in this country?
I do. I worry about every single trooper as well as every single police officer, or they're not my responsibility. Yes, because the groundswell, you can be killed by someone just because you're a police officer.
We just saw it, didn't we?
And
North Carolina.
And you've seen it way too often. And this morning I just left 50 recruits at the Municipal Academy talking exactly about this. But think about this. 50 police officers are going to join a police department in Rhode Island pretty soon that decided, I'm still going to do this because I believe in that mission, irrespective of that climate. And that's powerful stuff. And same with the troopers who just graduated. They know they're going to that environment. So I know law enforcement is in good hands. I know they're going to go, and it's cyclical in history, that you have wonderful men and women that want to do this. And I think people should know that law enforcement is not the typical policeman they see stopping a car, giving a ticket, or enforcing some type of statute. These are really bright men and women that do cyber, they do fusion, they do terrorism. They're experts in forensics, they're scientists, so to speak. And that's the new millennium of cops, which is encouraging.
Moving forward, we know the governor is casting a wide net when she is looking for your replacement, and it is possible that she could hire someone from the outside. Would that be a mistake, in your opinion, to hire someone as superintendent of the state police from outside the organization?
Well, to say it's a mistake, that's a decision the governor will make, and someone else will critique that, not me.
You have a voice in this process, don't you?
I certainly do.
So what do you tell her?
Oh, my strong support is Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Barry. He's an inside person. Inside is good. Rhode Island State Police have such a unique culture that they're, without getting into the excellence they are, I was a Rhode Island State Trooper. My predecessor was a Rhode Island State Trooper, and so on and so forth. when you have a group of people like that, I don't know you'll ever find anybody that will be better than the inside. There'll certainly be great candidates that come in from all over the country, but Kevin Barry is the person that has applied for the job, that wants to be the colonel. I know the rank and file in the state police support him, the retired people support him, and it would take somebody so much time to assimilate to that, and they'd have to rely on Kevin Barry and that staff to learn the job. So that's my strong opinion, but I respect the governor, and she knows where I stand with this.
But you want to see an inside
Absolutely.
hire. Okay. But legacy-wise, I mean, we've had Colonel Culhane. He was an outsider. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Colonel Stone, he was a Providence police officer, wasn't he? And
Yes.
he's the face of the Rhode Island State Police. I imagine you don't think they were a mistake in being
Well,
the
it
leaders.
depends on history. The time in history, Colonel Stone, I'm sure, was the right guy for the job. And at the time in history, Colonel Culhane was the right person for the job. But since then, you have this group of leadership that Colonel Culhane came in for a specific reason. Colonel Stone came in for a specific reason. So if you don't have scandals and all the things that go with agencies across the country that are negative, it makes really no sense to the people that work there to go outside. It's just inconsistent. And that this organization has leaders from troopers that are brand new, straight through the top person now, who is Kevin Barry. And that is not my opinion, that's a public's opinion. It's also, I share that. So it's difficult to, I get it. I mean, I understand the whole process. We have to bring a net in. And again, I'm a consultant, so to speak, on it. I will speak to the governor directly, as I have. She knows where we stand. And no one's trying to force her into a box, but I believe that that person is sitting right inside the organization.
A couple of minutes before we have to go to a commercial, Colonel, let me, there's a perception out there something's going on within the Rhode Island State Police. You know, you leave, and then a day after you announce your retirement, your number 2 well-respected Lieutenant Colonel Todd Catlow announces he's going to retire. I realize there's a 25-year cap with the guys that came on, the men and women that came on the job at that time, and he falls into that. So the only way he's going to continue to wear the uniform is if he is colonel of the state police. But he's leaving 5 months early. Is there something going on? People just think there is. Are they wrong?
No, well, they're right and they're wrong. What they're right about is, yes, there's something going on. I'm leaving. I decided to move on. And because I didn't do it the way other people may decide they should do it,
which is what?
The uniqueness that you leave without a job, I felt twofold. I didn't want to leave with a job lined up, because when the troopers learn that I'm looking and they will hear, they'll lose confidence in me, saying, he doesn't want to be here, we don't want him, something like that. So I felt leaving I came into the state police giving up a lot. I'm leaving the state police going into nothing. So that secondary life will happen on its own. The second piece with Colonel Catlow, you have to know that he is highly regarded by everyone, including me. He's my second in command, trusted person. But the process that unfolded, where the governor is looking for transition, you have a lieutenant colonel has 5 months to go, and you have another lieutenant colonel has 5 years to go. So her opinion was that if I have Lieutenant Colonel Catlow for a period of time, he's going to leave unless he's appointed the colonel.
Right.
And there's no transition if he's not the colonel. Lieutenant Colonel Barry is staying, so if Colonel Barry's appointed as the superintendent, then she has dealt with him for a period of time and she'd be comfortable. If she decides to take another out, then at least he's there for that transitional period. So cosmetically, it doesn't look right, but if you're second in command of state police, how would you feel about that?
Well, it sounds like he's probably wanted to be considered for the main job.
Yes, and I'd have to speak to him about it, but the point is, if I sat in his shoes, he didn't want to be part of the distraction. There's a new leadership team there. Kevin Barry's it, and so I think Todd, as a straight-up, respectable, honorable guy, decided that I have to leave anyhow. It's not a big deal, and I'll separate so he wouldn't just be as distraction from that. Even though he would not be at all, he would help, but from his perspective, he thought that would be the best thing to do.
I'm overdue for a break, so I'm going to start this section I'm going to end this section the way I started it, with a yes or no question. Your predecessor, when you took over for Colonel Doherty, he then ran for office. Yes or no, would you ever consider entering politics?
Never, ever.
You sound a little fuzzy on it.
There's nothing to do with anything to my
No
core.
interest in politics whatsoever.
And no interest ever.
All right. Our guest this week is outgoing Colonel of Rhode Island State Police, Stephen O'Donnell. When we come back, I take issue with something that he did many years ago. We'll have that for you. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Ted Nesi is off this week. Our guest is Colonel Stephen O'Donnell of the Rhode Island State Police. He announced his retirement just last week, I think?
Thursday.
Okay, on Thursday. We're taping this on a Friday morning. I said going into the break, take issue with something you did many years ago. I want to ask Nick in our control room to bring up an ID of yours from when you were, I guess, undercover with the in the mob, and this is a press pass, and I think you went by the name of Stephen Foley. You showed off some of this memorabilia when you announced your retirement. Do you understand why some of us in journalism, in news, might take issue with you posing as a reporter, that it erodes trust between the public and the news media, which is always sensitive anyway, giving the impression that we're in cahoots with the state police, an organization that as journalists we need to be scrutinizing, and here you are posing as a reporter for the organization's own gain?
No, it's a great point, but you should know this. I'm a good student of what you can and can't do. One of the things you can't do is you can't propose that you're in the press, you can't be clergy, and you can't be an attorney.
The FBI wrote fake articles in 2009 to lure some people in one of their investigations. So not everybody.
Well, those are the rules. Those are the three things you cannot.
Then why do you have a press pass if that's a rule?
It's more of a prop to have. For instance, if you're on a surveillance and you're taking photographs, and how do you fit in when you have a press pass sitting on there? It's not used to dupe somebody, because you could seriously dupe them, or if I want to say I was an attorney, you could do that. Those are protected, we get that. So most of what you saw were props. There's other things in your wallet, pictures of babies or things like that, to make you a normal person than what I was proposing to be.
I don't know if reporters are necessarily normal.
No, I mean, I get your point, because when
Did you ever use it?
No, you would never use those things.
Then that's just weird to me. Then why do you have it?
Prop. And for instance, if I'll give you an example. You leave your wallet somewhere on purpose. Why? You might say in an undercover operation. So someone's going to go through that, and that gives them access, and they read that, and they're going to use that to check who you are. And it's done on purpose. Or you leave it on the floor of your car where they can see it. It's just another prop to take away from what you really are. I'm an undercover state trooper, and if you can trick them to thinking you're somebody you're not, it's much more helpful.
Let's talk about your years undercover. It's something I've written about you doing. I'm fascinated. People, they can Google some of the stories I've written. You were a bookie undercover. It's a fascinating story. Were you ever afraid for your life at any point when you were infiltrating the mob and pretending to be one of them?
Probably every single day. And I don't mean direct fear where you're paranoid, but you have to have that. We call it healthy fear if you're undercover. We understand what you don't know. And what I mean by that is you leave your undercover case, and then the next time you go back, you don't know what happened by the time you left them till you come back. So that's where that fear comes in. If you don't have fear as an undercover, or even as a police officer, something's wrong with you. You have to have that thing that you can touch, understand. Fear's good, and it's a positive thing for an undercover as. So yes, for the entire time, but it's not the fear where you're trembling fear. It's just healthy antennas, instincts that stand up that you need to pay attention to.
Who was the scariest guy you ever interacted with, bad guy, be it organized crime or outside organized crime?
Well, since they're still alive, I don't want to tell them or tell anybody to make them more grandiose than they are, so I probably wouldn't want to tell you that one.
Fair enough. You've had a career of busting mobsters. They do bad things. They understand law enforcement has to catch them doing bad things. That's been the relationship for a long time. But it's Rhode Island. You run into these guys from time to time in this small sandbox. Former mob boss Luigi Baby Shacks Minacchio. He's in prison now. Eddie Lato, Capo. No, he's not.
Louis?
No, Eddie.
Oh,
Eddie Lato's in. Yeah, Minacchio's out. But and then Bobby DeLuca back in. But in many ways, you can't help it. You have to interact with them. What's that like when you put that guy in prison and then he's out, you run into him in the street? Is there almost a weird mutual respect between the two?
There is, and most people don't understand it. They'll tell you that, and I've talked to you and other people at length about, go ask them. They'll tell you. Now, did they like you? No, but they respect you. And that's all you want in this business, respect. We do our job, we do it right. You catch them or you don't catch them. That's that cloak and dagger world they live in. It's very strange. Do they want me walking their clubs or any cops walking their clubs? No.
No.
But I run into them all the time. When I stop working undercover, what I will tell you from what I know about them, they respect what we do. They respect us as people, but they also respect the organization. Now, respect has multiple layers. Their idea of respect might be totally different than your idea of respect. But the total respect is that they got a job to do, and we do it, and we're fair. And if you're fair about it, I don't think you're going to have any problems with anybody in any type of law enforcement environment, because most people understand. There's a small group that do not understand that at all, but they're, besides sociopaths, they're psychopaths, and those are the people you have to pay attention to.
Let's talk about the smoke shop raid. That was a real dark time for the state. You were a major player in that. You were actually there, and when you look at some of the video, you can see you were tussling with some of the people there. We have the video on the screen. Were you a major at the time? What was your rank?
I was detective commander.
Detective commander. Okay, so you had a big-time role in that. Do you regret how that was handled? And let me tell you why I asked that. I did an exit interview with Governor Don Kachiri, and he told me he felt he got bad advice on that and wished it had been handled differently. Do you agree?
Well, I can't tell you because I was not part of the decision-making process. As detective commander, my job was to execute the search warrant and make sure the undercovers were safe. So I had no conversations between me and anything.
And you didn't voice any concern with your
well,
bosses?
In the command structure, you speak up and you talk about the dynamics. You know, I'm a fairly well-schooled person on executing search warrants, but that is not my responsibility. My information goes to a chain of command. I am not privy to what transpired between the governor and Colonel Parry.
All right, so you did follow it through, but that was a tense moment. You were there. Do you think there could have been a more diplomatic way to approach it if you were a colonel at the time?
Well, it's unfair for me to criticize or analyze what anybody else did. So my work product from that was there's a warrant, and it's a legal warrant. If the cosmetics are different, I didn't make the decisions. I was part of it, and I would not weigh in. If it's appropriate or not, that's a question for Colonel Parry.
All right, let me ask you a question about decisions you make as a colonel now, then 38 Studios. There's been a lot of criticism aimed at your organization, particularly the AG's office, over investigatory materials in the 38 Studios criminal case. No charges were filed. At the heart of it is grand jury material. And you say, and I understand this argument, that your hands are tied because you can't release who testified in a grand jury and who pled the fifth. It's all grand jury material, and only the courts can do that. That actually does make sense. You also point out anyone can go to the court and ask them to release it. So why don't you, as a truly powerful figure in Rhode Island, go before the judge and ask for the material to be unsealed?
That's the question I would ask you. Why don't you or
I'm
someone
not the
else?
head of the Rhode Island State Police who's seen it.
Who's seen what?
The material. You know what's in it.
How do you know that?
Well, all right. But anyway, my point is you have a strong bully pulpit, much stronger than mine.
I'll tell you why, because there's different conflict about politicizing things. Our role is separate and apart from the grand jury process. I respect the grand jury process. So if anybody felt they needed those records, they need to go to the grand jury. Certainly, I guess you, in theory, the state police colonel could go ask the grand jury, can you release these documents? That is not the proper venue, in my opinion. I think anybody, any attorney, any legal issue, any media outlet can go and say, Judge, can we have them? I think it's an easy out to ask everybody else to do it, or you're asking the AG to do it. If that's what you think you should do, I don't think that's the role.
The governor could do it, right?
And she could, but that would be politicizing my office, and I think that would be a mistake.
All right, we have just a couple of minutes left. Want to cover a couple of quick things here. Your other life, you're a very successful coach at LaSalle Academy for lacrosse. You've won a few state championships in a row, rumor has it. You're going to continue to coach at LaSalle?
Yes.
For the foreseeable future?
Well, whatever my next career may be or my next employment, that will be something that I'll talk to them about. But coaching's in my blood. I think there's so much positive with it. You're pushing young men into really good schools. The proudest part of coaching LaSalle lacrosse is 35 of the 37 varsity players last year were academic all-state. It means they're 3.0s or better. So there's a culture for them. Forget their lacrosse achievements, their academic achievements. They're a group of achievers, and that's really cool.
Real quick, I was watching you at the out at the fugitive that was captured in North Carolina, just 30 seconds here, I got to think, with just seeing you there at 2 a.m., there's parts of this you're really going to miss.
I will miss that because I love the chase. And again, I don't make those arrests anymore. It's clear that we got a wonderful group of people out there doing that. But it's hard to let go of something that you love and it's that you have passion, but you have to know when to do it. And I'd rather do it this way than on the other end of it.
Let me end with this comment. For me, there's often a tension between news media and law enforcement. There should be. We like to watch out for you guys, watch what you're doing. But let me just tell you, you have made the state police a very accessible place. And I know the sacrifice. I have law enforcement in my family. I know the sacrifices that you make. And truly appreciate your service over the last 30 years. So thank you very much.
No, thank you.
If you missed any of it, it's online, WPRI.com. Ted Neitzel will be back next week. We'll see you on Newsmakers.